Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice Empire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I'm Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we are discussing a Winds of Winter theory, Mycrella Baratheon and her role in the Winds of Winter. Potential spoilers ahead.
Yeah, you know, we've been doing this kind of a thing over on our Patreon page where we have been doing book versus the show and how the books can possibly go, taking a look at what we've seen in the show. Yeah, are these character arcs going to be the same? Are they going to work? Some may, and most may not. Is where we've kind of been. But you know, a character that Ez and I have been wanting to talk about for quite some time is Mycrella Baratheon. Her role in Winds of Winter. I think you and I are both thinking completely different than the show is.
Yeah, lots of different things. I think at the end of this, we're going to outline like three different possibilities, three different, I guess, ways in which we could see her character going in the Winds of Winter. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so let's take a look here. I have just kind of a brief synopsis of her kind of arc in the show. She's not really that big of a deal in the show at all. So season 2 is when we see her get sent to Dorne, right? That's when Tyrion's talking about sending her to Dorne in order to strengthen House Lannister's political position during the War of the Five Kings. Tyrion Lannister makes plans to forge a marriage alliance between House Martell of Dorne by having Princess Myrcella wed to Trystane Martell, the youngest child and current ruler of Dorne. This obviously does not go well with Cersei. She is very much against it, but against her better wishes, it happens, and she gets sent off to Dorne. So skip ahead, season 4, while conversing with Oberyn Martell, right? That's when the Viper is there. Tyrion's trial is about to take place. So we're into Storm of Swords air territory there. Cersei laments that she has not seen Marcella in over a year, and Prince Oberyn informs her that the last time he saw Marcella was when she was swimming with his two daughters in the water gardens, having fun. Everything seems to be going well. Oberyn gives her words, saying that they do not hurt little girls in Dorne. Cersei replies, they hurt little girls everywhere. Skip ahead to season 5, towards the end of season 5. At the harbor, Marcella says her farewells to Prince Doran and Illyria before departing for King's Landing. Illyria, taking her vengeance, kisses her after coating a fatal poison on her lips, sealing her fate. This is when she's on a boat. Her and Jaime are having a conversation. She begins to tell her, hey, I'm your father, and we see blood running down her nose, and that's the end of Marcella. Season 6, so the beginning of season 6 is when we see Jaime arriving to the harbor. Cersei is out there watching, and Marcella is dead. And we see Trystane later killed by the Sand Snakes. So that is her arc in the show. As in the books, is it going to go that way?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So here's what we have in the book. So after the death of King Joffrey and Prince Oberyn Martell, Ariana Martell attempts to crown Mycrella Baratheon. Ariana is hopeful that the Dornish, who are still upset with the Lannisters, will rally behind Myrcella, who is in love with her brother, air quote love, Trystane Martell. Knowing her father would not agree, she does this in secret. Aerys Oakheart and other Dornishmen of the court are convinced to help. And you'll remember Sir Aerys Oakheart is the Kingsguard member who is sent with her to protect her. All right. Cersei Lannister has sent Sir Balon Swan to bring Myrcella back from Dorne. Sir Balon arrives in Sunspear and presents the skull of Sir Gregor Clegane to Prince Doran Martell. During their trial of combat, Oberyn Martell was able to force Sir Gregor to confess to the murders of Elia Martell and her son Aegon Targaryen. Interesting, I'm not so sure if it said Rhaenys, but definitely said Aegon. Cersei believes that the presentation of the skull will abate the Dornish. Cersei has also requested that Myrcella be returned to King's Landing and Trystane Martell accompany her. According to Sir Balon, it is the Queen's intention for Prince Doran to replace his brother, Oberyn Martell, on the Small Council. Queen Cersei also wishes for Trystane to visit King's Landing, just to sort of maybe be there with Myrcella and just to visit in general. Doran Martell, though, has caught wind that Cersei has set up an ambush in which Trystane will be killed on his way to King's Landing. Cersei will obviously blame this on her brother Tyrion. Instead, Doran decides to send Myrcella back with Lady Nym, and Lady Nym is as dangerous as her father, the Red Viper. So at the end of this, we kind of see Myrcella on her way to King's Landing with Lady Nym. So different than what we have in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have roughly three theories that we're going to explore in possible scenarios. Again, for those of you guys who you just watched the show, okay, the books are much more expansive, and we did an episode, video about this, talking about Sansa and some of the things that may happen with her, because positioning of where they are, and there's other players involved, right? And so how do I get this character to where they end up in the show with all of these other obstacles in the way? And not every domino is going to fall just perfectly to have them all end and have Bran the king and everything that people didn't like about season 8. Well, there's good news, because it's possible that it may go completely differently. I mean, if you're a Catelyn Stark fan and you hated the Red Wedding, well, if you've never read the books, she's still kind of alive. So there's a lot of interesting things. So theory 1 here, as we have it down here, a theory. Marcella goes back to King's Landing with Lady Nym. She is later given a poison kiss from Lady Nymeria, very similar to how Lady Ilaria Sand kisses her. And Marcella's goodbye when Jaime comes to pick her up. So Lady Nym.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So with this, it's sort of like our prediction or our theory would be that if this is Myrcella and she's going back to King's Landing with Lady Nym, we're trying to compare it to the show. And in the show, Lady Illyria Sand is the one who gives her that goodbye kiss. We see her board the ship with her father and dies in his arms, which is just, I mean,
heartbreaking.
I mean, gosh, it's because Jaime's struggling, wanting to talk with her and share that he's her father, and it's just like a good moment for him.
So many moments where he tries to start doing the right thing, and then it goes horribly wrong.
Yes, exactly. So that one I would say is our most sort of straightforward, just to try to keep it close to that. We saw the idea that she was poisoned by one of the sand snakes. So we have another Lady Nym, Nymeria, headed back to King's Landing, and could it be that she would poison her at some point there once she's back in court? So that is a theory or a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's very possible, because some of this ties into the theory that I have, the big theory I have, because if I think that theory is likely, if it is a way to kind of have it be similar to the show, but it would fit in some of the pieces that are in the books, and it would end up being pretty similar, but sometimes you have to merge characters in the show and things like that.
Yes. So
the theory I have, and then we have one more. We have 3 theories today, with the third one being amazing. But let's get to the second one here. So Marcella can go back to King's Landing, but I think her and Tommen's roles might be reversed. So in season 6, Cersei blows up the Sept of Baelor, and we see Tommen kill himself. Right? I mean, that's what happens. But a big difference is that in the books, Tommen is only 7 years old. It's very unlikely that Tommen would decide to kill himself, but it's more possible that Marcella may kill herself. So for that to happen, we would obviously have to have Tommen be taken out in some way or form, but that could happen, and another thing to remember, in the show, they cut out a lot of the Dorne angle. In the books, Dorne is much more prevalent. They are much more involved. But the show, we've talked about this before on our podcast, they kind of cut a lot of it out because it just wasn't doing as well as the showrunners had hoped. Maybe it's because they didn't know where they wanted it to end up ultimately. Maybe it's just ratings and things like that. But the Dorne angle got very kind of squished together, brushed past, and it's not nearly as prevalent. It's another location to film. There's a lot of stuff involved into it. So in the books, that's totally opposite. Dorne's very involved, very important. And if you were Dorne, do you really want? If you're Dorne, would you really want to kill Marcella? You're in more of a position to, right now the realm is in chaos. We've talked about this, you and I have talked before on the podcast, the blowing up of the Sept of Baelor itself may not happen in the books because in the show, when it's blown up, there's a lot has already kind of happened. Stannis is long gone. Jon Snow and Ramsay are about to have their battle, but it's one less person. The South is like completely taken care of. You have Dorne hanging out there, but they're not really doing a lot. And in the books, you have this other huge player from Essos, not Daenerys, but Aegon Targaryen, young Griff coming over to blow up the Sept of Baelor, possibly causing all of the people in King's Landing to riot. Not really the best idea, given the fact that there is another enormous military presence on its way. So if that, that may not happen, may go down differently. And so then rather than Tommen killing himself because the Tyrell, Marjorie Tyrell is taken out, all of that, it could be Myrcella killing herself, which would also be Marcella. It's also possible if Tommen gets deposed, Marcella comes back, becomes Queen Regent as she's a little bit older, which also ties into the Valonqar prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so to tie back into our first theory, the idea would be that maybe even Lady Nym, if Tommen is poisoned, well, then maybe this would move to, Myrcella. And it would be sort of interesting because that's what the Dornish, some of the Dornish were trying to do, was to put a crown on her head. So that would be interesting if she then got to that level, that role, and then because of whatever reason, whether it's Trystane or it's because of the reveal of her father, or friends at the Citadel who are killed, whatever, she then takes her own life. I actually like the idea that those could be, switched. And really, this whole conversation started when we said, I think this was today. I said to you, is Tommen actually going to kill himself? Is what I said, and we started looking at characters and where they are in the show, where they ended in the show, and then where they're at in the books currently, and that's what sort of led us down this path.
Yeah, absolutely. He's another character who just seems unlikely that his role will play out the same way that it does in the show. I mean, it's entirely possible. We think about. There's so many pieces that have to move, and as we've done a couple of these, like that Sansa video we did, you look at, well, for Sansa to get anywhere close to where she is in the show, you'd have to move all of these other pieces, so it just seems less likely. Well, some of the pieces that involve Tommen and Marcella in the show, there's just so many more obstacles in the book to get there that it just starts seeming a little less likely.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, the third theory we have here is I'm gonna toss to you because this one's great.
Yeah. Yeah. This one is great, and I actually have to give credit to a few different folks because this conversation started around us trying to decide would Tommen, would he kill himself? And then we thought, well, if the roles were switched, what would that mean? And then I started to think to myself, well, what is going on in Dorne and what is going on with Myrcella? And as I was reading, upon my second third read through, I had completely forgotten about the character Rosamund Lannister, and that she had a handmaiden with her, Myrcella, when she went down to Dorne. And so it's interesting to me that I didn't even. And once I read that, I've recently been thinking about some of our squires, some individuals in the story who aren't able to speak, or maybe Jane Poole, who are body doubles. And once I came across that, again, I kind of thought, oh, this is awesome. And then I did what we often do, is I went and did some research. I thought, I cannot be the first person who came across this. And so I want to give some credit here to, and we can put a link to this, but to Preston Jacobs, who I found did sort of a theory, and I would like to add to some of what he has, over on his YouTube video. But the idea is that there's a twist, and that Mycrella Baratheon, who is coming back, with Lady Nym, is not actually Mycrella Baratheon. It's actually this Rosamund Lannister, and that there was an old switcherooski, if you will. Well, I think I called it a Natalie Portman, Keira Knightley episode 1 switcheroo. Okay. So, which I think is interesting. But here's the idea that when Myrcella was being sent down to, first she was sent to Braavos. I mean, we had to avoid. This is in a Clash for Kings, and it's like Tyrion's trying to avoid the Stannis and his fleet. He's sending Myrcella, so he sends her with Sir Aerys Oakheart. There's a Septa, there's a few other people as well, but they're going to go to Braavos first, get their forces, and then they're going to go over to Dorne. And along the way, and I can't remember exactly, but I believe sort of she's disguised in some way, and she sort of does a swap. And so Rosamund takes her place. She looks very much like Princess Myrcella. And so to Feast for Crows, the Queenmaker, I think this is Aerys, or someone is recalling that the imp picked her for this purpose over many girls of nobler birth. They are distant kin. And so that's speaking to this, why pick Rosamund Lannister, and why send her with Myrcella, Baratheon? Why pass over these noble girls and send her? Well, because they look alike. So then he also sent a member of the Kingsguard with her as well. This happened to be the knight that Sansa Stark preferred to accompany her throughout the Red Keep. So I thought that was interesting, because you think about Sir Aerys Oakheart, and something to add on to some of the theories and the Reddits and the different things that we've read and researched is the idea that he's one of those members of the Kingsguard that you can actually kind of get behind, and he wants to be worthy of that cloak, of that white cloak. And oftentimes you'll hear Jaime and you'll hear Sir Barristan talk about, or even Eddard Stark at one point, I think, mentions that this Kingsguard now is not like the Kingsguard of old. And so you're trying to find, like, when Jaime starts to have these moments where he's coming back and he's redeeming himself. That's awesome. Sir Aerys is also one of those individuals, and it's something you have to look closely for. And so I think that really fits into something that we've been reading and studying here. So he goes with Myrcella. At one point he's quoted as saying that he loves Myrcella as a daughter. He could never have a daughter of his own, no more than he could have a wife. He had a fine white cloak instead. So not only is she disguised as Rosamund Lannister on her way to Braavos/Dorne, she continues this disguise while in Dorne. And so then we kind of thought that this has continued all the way throughout her time there. So, and if you go back and you look, and again, like I said, Preston Jacobs does a really good job of pointing out a few different situations where what Aerys Oakheart is telling us, is not adding up as to why a Septa who hasn't had red spots would stay, with a girl who has red spots, or chicken pox, if you will, mm-hmm. right? And so that they had to be maybe more in on this plot. And so it's pretty complex, actually, and you have to really go look at some real specific lines. The biggest thing, though, is that he charges Darkstar, and he gets in this fight after there was really no reason. Ariana Martell at one point is wondering, why is it that Sir Aerys had to die? He keeps looking for a way in which he can keep his princess safe, and he doesn't trust the Martells, none of them, the Sand Snakes, nothing. I mean, he's very distrustful of this region, and so I believe they kept the disguise up, and that she is hidden. She's a handmaiden. Now, the one thing, and after I was thinking about this, and Sir Matt and I were talking, I thought, wouldn't the handmaiden then also accompany, Myrcella to King's Landing? So wouldn't she still be there in the presence of Lady Nym? We don't really know exactly, but I think the idea is that these could be, two different characters. She could end up actually staying in Dorne, which I think would be interesting for Winds of Winter. So I don't know. Thoughts on that, Sir Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when the idea of, we're always talking about in the bigger Song of Ice and Fire series, the idea that somebody is somebody else. And you could say, well, not everyone can be somebody else. But if you really start to look across the series, there are just so many scenarios in which we already have confirmed cases of somebody being somebody else that this would fit right in. Jane Poole pretending to be Arya Stark. You go back to the Hedge Knight series. Blood Raven, at the turning of White Walls. You have. Melisandre, we know, wears a glamour rattle shirt, and Mance Rayder, and so many characters are pretending to be somebody else in some form or fashion, that this would work out really well. And again, the ultimate question just comes down to the books versus the show, and how could you, as a writer, and get a lot of these characters from Gur's point of view, and Gur is obviously not going off of the show. He's writing the story he wants to write. But for us, now having this we're in this odd place where I cannot remember any other sort of media in which the source material did not finish before they finished the aside, other versions and tellings of it. But so it's just so unlikely that a lot of these characters will end up in the same way. And you may look at Marcella as a smaller character, a character who, especially her role in the show, isn't as important, but she is very important to a lot of different storylines. She's very important in Jaime's arc, Cersei's arc, and the Dorne arc. So she is and even somewhat Tyrion. So she's a key piece in a lot of these arcs. And looking at what we know with the show, it just seems unlikely that we would get to the Sept of Baelor blowing up with and then Tommen killing himself. But Marcella's a big piece in that. Marcella's a big piece in Cersei's development and what will cause her to go down that way. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be different. And it's possible there's a body double, or she is still in Dorne. I mean, even either of the two theories, the one I presented and this one, Dorne is very important and may not want her to die.
Yeah, and here's a couple more things, just some bonus, I guess, to kind of add on to this. What really we started to think about was, at the end of this story, when it all kind of settles down, will there be some of those great houses that are left over? Is like House Lannister going to be destroyed? Is it Tyrion who's left over? And would it only be Tyrion? Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't maybe Myrcella live, or Tommen, or someone else who? Again, those are Baratheons, air quote. But like we were looking at Tyrek Lannister, and his father and his mysterious disappearance and stuff. So it's like, who would be left? And then I started to think too. In this whole idea that you'd have a body double, right? So Sir Balon kind of fills that role of Jaime Lannister in like escorting, a princess back. But it's sort of said by Prince Doran that he will probably go fight Darkstar, maybe. And so I thought that was interesting. Unless one thing that we see is Prince Doran kind of understands that when Myrcella is invited, when she's requested back, he is supposed to go fill the seat of his brother on the council. He is also supposed to bring Trystane with him as well. And he reveals that there's a plot, to kill Trystane along the way, blame it on Tyrion, and then make it, so that Prince Doran is there to sort of witness this. And so he can't blame anything on Cersei. You could actually flip that now, and you could almost wonder if that Prince Doran is doing the same thing with Myrcella. Is he sending her back with Lady Nym and perhaps Sir Balon Swan, and that Sir Balon will be the one who witnesses this attack, and he can vouch that the Dornish had nothing to do with it, and Myrcella is killed in that way, and Lady Nym is then able to kind of continue on. So there's a lot. It can be very complex, and it's interesting to kind of think about the different ways in which this could go, and in the Winds of Winter, and then how that can affect other things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and we're going to come back with more of these. We've got a slew of characters that you could really almost call this part one, if you don't kind of count that Sansa video we did, or you can count this as part 2, but we have plenty more of these to come back with, and we're going to analyze just about every character, every house. You may think they might not be important. Well, they might be. So we have plenty more of these to come through. But great discussion, and a lot of fun to discuss these characters and what roles they may play in Winds of Winter. So we want to thank you guys for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will continue to discuss, and we're doing this on House Lannister, is where we're going to start and see all the characters. How does the show have any impact on them? What is their role, purpose, and story arc going to be in Winds of Winter?
Yeah, and if you guys enjoyed this, we do run a podcast, a full, reread podcast that you guys can subscribe to, and we'll have links for that down in the description. But here on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like us, leave a comment down below, or you can send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We will see you next time, and remember that the night is dark and full of terrors.